What, let's integrate this, y'all. So I'm sorry. I don't think I need this. I know I can sign standing up. It gives me a great deal of pleasure to stand here with members of the City Council, Councilman Bill Campbell and Jim Maddox, with Central Atlanta Progress, Dan Sweat and John Leake, and our Director of Planning, to sign into law an idea that's been floating around in our city for some time. And that is, how are we going to get housing downtown with land costs very high and with interest rates high and with cost of construction rising? It's been almost prohibitive to develop downtown housing. One of the things that the City Council and the state decided that we could do is to create an enterprise zone for housing in downtown Atlanta. And the two pieces of legislation that I'm about to sign create generally an enterprise zone for housing, and also grant that tax-exempt status to the first of what we hope to be many housing developments that will be developed for downtown Atlanta, south of North Avenue and roughly between Boulevard and Northside Drive and the stadium. So to me, this is a historic day that's building on a number of studies that have been done, I guess starting way back in 1983 with Central Atlanta Progress doing a study around MARTA stations. And the final was the Housing and Urban Development Assistance Team that met a month ago and determined that there's right now a need for 7,150 units of housing in what we call upper downtown. That's the area right around the Civic Center and the Civic Center Station, and roughly between Baker Street and North Avenue. So, do I just sign and you all talk later, or why don't I just sign and then we'll ask Dan Sweat to say a word and our councilman from the district. Okay, my job's done. Mr. Sweat, thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and let me just say that this, as the mayor's indicated, is another very important step in sort of a long-running history of a very close partnership and relationship between the business community and city government. And it is an extension of several studies which have identified, we think, a growing market at long last that we've all struggled to see come about in the central area. It builds on a lot of activities and a lot of expenditure of public and private monies, not the least of which is the MARTA system, the expressway system, and other improvements that create the kind of environment that makes the market come alive in the central area. We think we've always been very careful about tax abatement type activities. We think that they should be used where there's a gap that exists between what can happen in the free enterprise marketplace and what should be supported in the interest of the public. And I don't think there's any question with the council and the mayor and all of us worked for years that this is clearly in the public interest that we pursue the development of housing in our central city. And we believe that this abatement process will, when added to the other tools that we've all been working toward, will finally make that housing come alive. We've probably no time in my 13 years at CAP have we seen more interest on the part of the investment community and the development community and the marketplace with regard to housing. So we're very excited about it, Mr. Mayor, and we pledge to you and the council our best efforts to work with you to see that that 7,000 figure is real and that we make it happen.
Very good. Councilman Campbell, the councilman from most of this district.
Thank you very much. I'm also happy to be here on behalf of Marvin Arrington, the President of the Council, and Jim Maddox, who is joining me, and happy to be the sponsor of the first piece of legislation that will actually apply these tax abatements. The first piece of legislation applies to 330 Ralph McGill Place, which is directly behind the Civic Center. It is a very exciting project. We believe it is a part of the Central Atlanta Progress and the Bedford Pine community's ongoing efforts to provide quality housing, and we believe this is but the first in a series of other tax abatements that will be given to other housing projects that are around Atlanta. So we're very hopeful that this will start a trend. We're also hopeful that in the upcoming session of the legislature, we will be able to ask the legislature to increase the space by which we have the tax abatements to other areas within the city, areas in the northwest part of the city that are also meet the census requirements for housing or enterprise zones. So we will be going to the legislature asking for an expansion of this of the tax abatement legislation. But in the meantime, we're very happy to have this one. Our thanks again to Central Atlanta Progress, to the planning staff, and certainly to Herman Russell and the developers at 330 Ralph McGill Place, who we believe have really shown a great deal of courage in going forward with this project in the face of some uncertainty. We're very happy to have them, and we hope that there will be many more. Thank you very much.
I think basically everything has been said, needs to be said, other than the fact that we're also concerned about the same project to expand itself in the southwest side of the city. As you know, we're trying to also develop the south side of the city, which is so important. But we certainly support this, and again, we thank everyone that had a role in this.
Any questions?
Indeed, it's very commendable that you considered McGill Place to be the beginning of this project. But why, since the issue involving Auburn Avenue and the revitalization has propped up, why didn't you consider Auburn Avenue first?
Auburn Avenue is included in this, and the reason we didn't consider Auburn Avenue first is that there's no private developer that's come forward to invest the time and talent and money that has gone into McGill Place. And whenever there is, and I hope that's soon, that we will have a developer who's interested in housing anywhere downtown. It's a matter of first come, first serve.
There are several other private developers who are close to being on the hook, for lack of a better word. They've known that this would go through. What else do you think would be a hurdle to get them to sign on the dotted line? Is there anything else that stops?
No, I think the main thing we've been dealing with is a struggle with MARTA to make sure that some of the most available land and the most exciting land sites in town that are now essentially under MARTA's control, that we work out some agreement that that land be made available for housing. And we're moving along in that process, I think, with good cooperation from MARTA. But it's land acquisition right now that's probably the only holdup.
Do you think some of these developers are in a wait and see kind of a pattern where they want to look at McGill as a test case?
Well, if they are going to look at McGill is sold out their first phase before it's even completed. And what I say to developers is they've never had a market like this anywhere in the country. We know that IBM is opening up a building. It's about 35 stories up already. It's going to go up to about 50 stories. We know that Bell South is going to be ready with its employees within 2 years. We know that AT&T will be doing something in downtown Atlanta. We know that Hooker Barnes has a development. We know that John Carter has a development. We know that there's about 25 million square feet of office space right now under construction downtown, midtown, Buckhead. And there's nobody building housing. We know that the employment downtown and midtown will increase by about 15,000 employees in the next 4 years. Where are all those people going to live? And we think that housing is a market, you know, that's simply crying to be met. I talked to a young lady and her husband last night that just bought a house for $125,000 in Clayton County. And I gave them all kinds of hell, but they said they could not find anything in Atlanta for $125,000. What we're saying is that a young couple like that can afford $125,000 ought to have an active condominium market. They ought to have active rental units for people who can't afford quite that much. There ought to be a wide variety of housing opportunities going up in downtown Atlanta. And this legislation is basically trying to facilitate a market that's already there, we think.
Before there are other questions, let me take an opportunity to respond to two things. One is Mr. Denmark's question with regard to Auburn Avenue. First of all, there is no limit on the number of developers that can obtain this tax abatement, and so we obviously are encouraging other developers, and certainly Auburn Avenue is a prime target. Also along Auburn Avenue, the Butler St. Y has acquired the Herndon building, and we're meeting under the direction of Marvin Arrington to try to acquire the Rucker building for the City of Atlanta also, as well as proceeding with our municipal market expansion. So we do believe that we're making some very forceful steps in the revitalization of Auburn Avenue. The second point is that under the new tax law, it's obvious that rental units are going to be costing more for rents. And one of the sure things under the new tax law is that the mortgage interest allowance will continue to be one of the sole reasons for people owning homes. So we do believe that home ownership, especially in this area, is going to be very exciting, and coupled with the tax abatement, that will make in-town housing even more affordable.
What are some of the other disadvantaged areas targeted for enterprise zone development in the future?
Well, let's say we're not throwing enterprise zones away. We already have one in North and West Atlanta that's for employment. We have one in the Atlanta Industrial Park. We have one in Southeast Atlanta that essentially enabled us to open up the General Motors plant. I think both of those have paid off. The General Motors plant now employs about 3,900 people. It's got about a $200 million a year payroll. The Atlanta Industrial Park now is up to about 600 or 700 people. It will probably get to up to 3,000 by the time it's completed. But I don't think, for instance, I don't think you need an enterprise zone for housing in any other place but downtown. You may need some. We do have an enterprise zone for employment around the airport and the Atlanta Industrial Park, Southside Industrial Park. I'm not even sure we need that. It's good that we have it. But the theory of the enterprise zone is to do something where you just can't make it work financially without, some breaks. And what we're doing is giving people a chance to sort of get housing up and get on their feet and make sure that it's, that it works.
Mayor, can you entertain one other question or another subject?
Depends on what it is.
Some of the firefighters say that they will not work overtime because of this pay.
Well, we don't want them to work overtime. We're very happy that they don't work overtime, and we think that this pay dispute is nonsense. It's a result of the firefighters of unions themselves suing the city of San Antonio. We're responding to a reinterpretation of the Fair Labor Standards Act, which essentially says that you have to pay people for the amount of time that they work. This means that instead of people being paid the same amount of time every 2 weeks as we normally do, if they work a little less this 2-week period than they did the next 2-week period, they'll get a little less this time and a little more the next time. The money is the same, and we've tried to explain that in 1,000 different ways. By the time they get to the next payroll, they will probably realize that the money is the same. If there is a more efficient and effective way that we can negotiate, that we can pay people, we're willing to do that. But there really isn't anything to be demonstrating about, and you demonstrate when people will not meet with you. And we've been meeting with the firefighters at every level, and the chief has been working on this now with City Hall and with the firefighters, and we're basically trying to accommodate everybody's needs. Everybody doesn't know what they need, though, or what they want.
Given that the Fire Bureau manpower is already short, if a number of them do refuse to work overtime, how do you figure the city will handle that?
I don't think I worry about that. That's what I have Chief Hamer for, and I'm sure Chief Hamer has got that situation well in hand.
Mr. Mayor, are you personally refusing to meet with the firemen?
There's nothing for me to meet with them about. You see, anybody that wants to meet with me at any time, see, can come into my office with or without an appointment. But when 200 people come down, they don't want to meet, they want to show off. And if they want to come down embarrassing me, I'm going to have to act like a fool with them, and nobody's interests are going to be served, particularly when they're people who are meeting, people who are making the administrative decisions. I don't make bookkeeping decisions. And the people who make bookkeeping decisions are meeting with them every day, and they will have the problem resolved.
Do you feel that either Mr. Hamer or Commissioner Napper somehow perhaps didn't get the word across, because a lot of the firefighters are upset, and just as upset over receiving a memo the day that some of them found their paychecks $200 short? They seem to be as concerned about the way it was handled as to the change itself.
Well, let me say, it's a very complicated process. It took us a long time to figure out what the law said. For a long period of time, there was even disagreement amongst our lawyers in terms of trying to understand the complications that result from a court decision. I think that those kinds of things will take care of themselves.
Under what circumstances would you agree maybe to meet with them?
Anytime. I meet with them all the time. I've met with them away from City Hall at a church. I've met with them in City Hall anytime. But see, when people come down in a big demonstration, that's not to have a meeting. And I have never closed my door to representatives of the union or representatives of any other group in the city. But I mean, it wasn't really productive for me to volunteer to get into what I know is going to be a shouting match.
If your chief can show you a way legally...
All he doesn't have to show me anything. He just has to do it. It's his call, and he's making it. See? And that's why I hired him. I trust his judgment, and that's not one of the things I'm going to worry about.
They continue to talk about perhaps a dispute between the chief and Commissioner Napper.
No, nobody's talking about a dispute on that order. It's an administrative dispute that Commissioner Napper doesn't have much to do with either. And it's between the chief and the law department and the union and administrative services, or general services, whatever the heck we call it, and they're going to work that out. But you know, when you got 200 people trying to make bookkeeping decisions in the streets, it's not going to work.
One last question. Is there anything you could say to citizens who perhaps have been hearing about some of this and maybe concerned about their fire protection? Is there anything you could say?
I can guarantee that every fire station will be manned or occupied by firefighters, male or female, and that the chief has that situation under his control, and they shouldn't worry about it. In fact, you should never worry about things that are said publicly in demonstrations. You have to learn. I'm a great demonstrator. There's a difference between preaching and policy. What you say in a demonstration is preaching. See? And when they have a policy dispute, they'll come and sit down, and we'll have a policy disagreement, and we will make a policy announcement, and then we might have a problem. But we haven't gotten to that point yet. There's a great deal of communication at the policy level. At the policy level, things are being worked out. At the preaching and wolf ticket level, you know, that's sort of city politics. And you all ought not overreact to that. Thank you.
We're about to get started with our program. Those of you in the back, as soon as you get your refreshments, we appreciate if you be seated. It's been a long day, and we started out kind of slow, but I think we've picked up the pace as we got along. The coffee didn't get here till late, and some of you didn't get started till after 12, but we promise to do better tomorrow. I hope that the sessions have been informative. I've had an opportunity to attend some of them, and they have been enlightening and in some instances comical. But the purpose for us being here, as we all know, is to learn a little bit more, to be informed, and to be better recreation professionals. This evening I start to say we are gathered here. But we're taking this brief moment, this brief opportunity to recognize some of our peers and our colleagues who have served the city and served it well for many years. This evening we will recognize those who are to receive their service pins for a service rendered the city of Atlanta whose anniversary has started 5 years from the date, 10 years from the date, 15 years from the date, 20 years, and 25. Okay? Now, so everyone will understand the procedure and the process, we know that many of you have not received your pins in the past, and we'll try to make up for that, but not this evening. We don't have enough time to do that, and I think you all will leave before we exhausted all those different names, but I do promise that those of you who have not received your pins, we will get your pins for you. But this evening we're recognizing those whose anniversaries fall in the year 1986. If the mayor is able to, we will ask him to recognize two other categories, and that is those who are due pins and those who we recognize as being honorable mention, and those are folks who have served the city for 20 years or more. Before I ask our mayor to come forward, I'm going to ask our commissioner, Betsy Baker, to come forward and say a few words.
Well, looks like you all are very relaxed, got through a little stress management course today, and I'm sure those who have been here for 25 years could teach us all about stress management. There's a lot to be learned. I hope you're really getting a lot out of these 2 days and enjoying being here, boning up on your management skills, and I think that's appropriate that we recognize after a day such as today, where we learn how to communicate better, how to deal with people, how to manage our own stress, and how to work on the stress of others, which is what a large portion of recreation is all about. I think it's very appropriate that we come together to give out these pins of service. On behalf of the Commissioner's Office, I would like to thank you for the good work that you're doing, but mainly on behalf of the young people of the city of Atlanta. You know what you're doing for our city and for our citizens, and a hearty thank you from everyone. It's with great pleasure we are indeed honored to have Mayor Young with us, and as long as he can stay, we're going to have him fast and furious handing out pins. We have a lot of pins to give. Mayor Young, thank you.
Let me thank you for inviting me to do this, but you should have warned me that you were going to serve first. I will know not to be late with this crowd again. You all didn't leave a cookie. But it's always a pleasure to be with you, and even though I don't spend any more time with the recreation part of our city employees, you really are, I think, a part of the city that I feel closest to. You're one of the more valuable parts of the city, and through your activities and through the parks and recreation facilities that you maintain, you work and have worked with some of the finest young people that our city has produced. But a lot of them weren't fine young people when you started working with them. And it was your being able to show a little faith in them, helping them to feel like they're important, demonstrating to them some skills that they could master that would mean something to their future, that I think contributed to many of the young people that have succeeded in our city. Many of them would not have made it at all. In this day and age, when we're doing all of this talk about gangs, and when we're giving all of the references to the police, I keep thinking that where it needs to be, both the money and the responsibility, is with Parks and Recreation. And I'm going to be doing whatever I can to see to it that we continue to expand and develop the kinds of programs that reach out to some of these young people that are not just bad. They don't have much to do, and they are kind of sorry. And it's a lot easier nowadays to find ways to mess up than it is to find ways to do well. You need help to do well. You don't need any help to mess up. Most of us, that comes naturally to us. And yet, most of us have amounted to something basically because somebody, somewhere along the line, took some time to tell us that we were somebody and to teach us some skills that would help us throughout our lives. I'd like to, first of all, ask those who we don't have pins for, but who've been here for 20 years or more, if we could please ask you just to take the time to come up here and be recognized, starting with Mr. Albert T. Tanzil. "37 years. Won't you just stand up here for a minute on? Mr. Charles Baskin. Let's give him a... Mr. Branch Curington, Mr. Johnny Owensby, Marge Wood, Pam Taylor, the original Rambo, Charles Rambo, Robert McFadden, Eddie McLemore, and William Walker, Jr. On behalf of the city of Atlanta and on behalf of a whole lot of parents, let me say that we really and truly do appreciate your work and your efforts in behalf of the youth of our city. Thank you very much, and God bless you, and we will have some pins for you one of these days. And now I'd like to start with the first 25-year pin, Marge Wood. 20 years, Mr. William Walker, Jr. Mr. Charles Rambo, Mr. Robert McFadden, and Mr. Eddie McLemore. Let me say that about particularly those who have been, anybody that's been anywhere 20, 25 years deserves some real special commendation just for being able to survive. And when you think about, I mean, you've been there long enough now so that you can see some of the results of your work. I know over at Washington Park, Branch Curington used to have some pictures of on the wall of Marvin Arrington, of Carolyn Long Banks, when they were in the 12 and under. Marvin was bow-legged then. But how much learning to play tennis, how much learning to play golf, how much learning to swim, how much learning really just to handle yourself with other people. because I'm convinced that maybe folks say that that's the reason the city doesn't run any better. But my philosophy of administration, really, I contend I learned on the basketball court. That basically you've got to keep the ball moving, you've got to pick, you've got to check, you've got to defend, but essentially you've got to play as a team. And if you learn to play as a team in almost anything in life, it carries on over into everything else you do in life. And I never was very good at basketball because I was about half the size of everybody, and I wasn't quite Spud Webb, but I did know how to keep a ball moving, and I did know how to make sure that big guys like Jim Washington would get the ball when they got under the basket where they could put it in. Since he couldn't shoot from outside the outside the free throw line either. But what you've really done for our city, I think it's almost impossible for you to measure. But I want you to know that we do appreciate it, and we do want to find ways to help others to understand how important that we know this part of our work is. And now those who were 15 years. Mr. Robert Wilkins. Elijah Walker. Would you give it to him, Miss Margaret Taylor. Mr. Clinton Isaac. Mary Dorsey. Is that Jordan Landy? Warden Landy. Okay. You didn't look Mexican to me, I'm sorry. Kenneth Johnson. Douglas Henry. And James Armstrong. Very good.
Scott, the Republican for the 5th District Congressional race. You are invited to visit the Hungry Club and to tune in, and are to tune in. It is now my pleasure to present Councilman.
Thank you all, and welcome to the Hungry Club, our inaugural session of this 1986 year, and we're very pleased to have the Honorable Mayor Andrew Young. Before I present Mayor Young, there are several distinguished dignitaries in the House that I would like to present. First is my colleague and Mayor Young's personal councilman, in that he represents the district in which he lives, Councilman Jim Maddox, who is here with the United Way delegation, and would ask the entire United Way delegation to stand as well. The United Way delegation is a little hesitant to stand, but we will ask them all to stand so we can see the fine work the United Way is doing. Please stand so that we can receive you here at the Hungry Club. And by the way, for the 3rd year running, the Atlanta's airport has been chosen as the finest airport in the world, and we're certain that Commissioner Carter is responsible for much of that. Also, in Mayor Young's, alongside of Mayor Young for 32 years, a person who has stood beside him, looks much better than he does, plays a much better game of tennis, his wife, Jean Young. It is a great honor to introduce Mayor Young. He has given this inaugural address now for 5 years and has always provided us with a great deal of information, both for discussion and for reflection. But on today, it is obviously a very, very special day for many reasons. And as I reflect that a song that Tina Turner had, "We Don't Need Another Hero," and as I think now that the new Supreme Court has taken helm under the reins of William Rehnquist, we need a leader. When blacks are being killed in record numbers in South Africa, we need a conciliator. When the leading cause of death for blacks under the age of 25 is death, is murder, we need a healer. Andrew Young has been all of those and more, a true American hero. No matter whether you agree or disagree, and he has often been involved in controversies, but no one could ever question his courage. Standing beside Dr. King in the darkest hours and standing with him when he was taken from us, Andrew Young has been there. As the first black elected from the South to represent this district in Congress in 1972, Andrew Young was there fighting the fights that needed his help. As the first black ambassador to the United Nations with President Carter, Andrew Young brought a sense of vision and humanity to the United States' foreign policy, one which is noticeably absent since his leaving that post. Returning to Atlanta in 1981, he was elected mayor and re-elected in 1985. A true American hero, a man who has stood the test of time, who continues to stand for all those principles that we find so dear. Please join in welcoming him to the Hungry Club Forum again, the Honorable Mayor Andrew Young.
Thank you very much. It's always difficult for me to address this gathering because the temptation is, in your inaugural Hungry Club Forum, to kind of recite a sort of how we're doing in City Hall. And yet that gets boring, and everybody knows we're doing all right. And if you think we're not doing all right, you have a chance to ask about it after I finish. I thought I'd like to tell you just what I've been doing, and maybe why I've been doing some of it. It's a phenomenal job being mayor of this city. And the kinds of problems I have are problems that no other mayor in America has. For the most part, they're the problems of success right now. The biggest hassle over the last 3 days in my life that has been worrying me the most, in one sense, is where is AT&T going to locate its building? AT&T has definitely decided to build a building in Atlanta. And there are 3 developers that are competing for AT&T's location. One has done a very creative design around a 50-story tower at 15th Street and Peachtree, right across from Colony Square and between Colony Square and the IBM building. Another has done a 55-story tower on Peachtree and Baker. And still another developer has done a 75-story tower right behind the Trust Company building, right off Central City Park. And AT&T is trying to decide not whether or not to locate in Atlanta, but where in Atlanta it's going to locate. And the decision is the kind of thing that has happened so often to us that we sort of take it for granted and think it doesn't relate to us. But in almost all of these buildings that are going up around here, and it would pay you some time just to ride around and walk through these buildings. The thing that we said we wanted to do most in our election as mayor was to generate jobs, and particularly generate jobs amongst the minority community. Well, you know, even out in the 400 corridor, way outside the city limits, the number of people working in there who are minorities is phenomenal. I mean, AT&T and IBM have close to 30% minority employment. And those are very good jobs. Those are well-paying jobs. Those are jobs with long-term security. For those are two of the finest companies in the world. And when you attract those kinds of businesses into the city, and you keep them growing up into the city, you're really building a very healthy climate. And then when you hook that up with a school system that's beginning to train young people to work in word processing and computer programming, even in the elementary school grades. In fact, one of the projects my wife is working on with IBM is teaching 4-year-olds in some of our low-income neighborhoods to read and write with computers, so that our children at 4 and 5 years old are way ahead of folk like me who are still scared of computers. And the kinds of things that are happening at that level as we become more and more a high-tech city are really exciting and phenomenal. And even though they are companies with blue-chip names, essentially when you get inside the door of those companies are populated by all of the citizens of our city. And people are being employed and people are moving up the ladder in those positions based on the way they work and how well they can deliver to the profit structure of that corporation. When we look at our school system and we see that, amongst other things, through the Dream Jamboree and other special efforts, the Adopt a School program between businesses and schools, we're now having close to 65% of Atlanta's high school students, the graduates of our 4-year high school program, going on to universities. And year before last, they won $14 million worth of scholarships to do that. But in the middle of all of this success, the world's busiest airport, and I'm going back to my office now, I think, to get an announcement of probably still another air carrier that wants to come into Atlanta. That would be Swiss Air. And just since I have been mayor, we've started new flight service internationally to Ireland, to Stuttgart and Munich in Germany, and to Japan, and to Mexico, and now we're talking about flight service to Geneva or Zurich probably. But what that means and what that has traditionally meant, whenever a foreign air carrier moves into the area, the number and the amount of business in the area quadruples in the first couple of years. And so we now have 160 Japanese companies in the state of Georgia, and we can expect that number to grow. We have 140 German companies, and those companies are hiring altogether in the state of Georgia. They're now over 1,000 foreign companies, and they are hiring close to 70,000 Georgians. Well, continuing that really depends on a well-run city, and it depends on doing what we've always done, and that is anticipating and solving problems. Now, the amount of new money that's coming in here, I think, is all but certain that because we got $7 billion worth of new investment in '83, and $10 billion in '84, and $12 billion in '85, we're going to probably get somewhere in that neighborhood in '86, and on into '87. It doesn't seem to be slowing down. At the same time, with all of this growth, we still are plagued by some problems that we have to find solutions to. Some are technical, and we're working on those. Those are the easiest ones. How to find enough water resources so that if we have another drought, we won't have to worry about having enough water for the new businesses that are coming in. And so we're working with Fulton County to develop a North Fulton water treatment center that will give us additional water resources. As we have all of this new development, and between Buckhead and Midtown and downtown, you're talking about another 25 or 30 million square feet of new office buildings. All we've got downtown now is about 30 million square feet. So you're talking about the size of Atlanta's business community. It's downtown, extending from 5 Points all the way out to Lenox Square, literally doubling within 5 years. Well, what does that do to fire? What does that do to police services? What does that do to our population? We know now that with that new influx, the population of the metropolitan area will grow from about 2 million to about 4 million by the year 2015, they say. And yet, even as they said that we were going to grow to 2 million, they thought it would take us till 1990 to get to 2 million. We got to 1990 by 85. We're already at 2.5 million. And so the kind of growth and development that we have here puts a real strain on city services, one that I think our public servants are doing a great job at trying to meet up with. But even as we do this, we've got some agonizing problems of people who are left homeless and hungry. We're still, as a city, running 39, not a city, we still have in the city 39 shelters for people who are homeless and hungry. And we're feeding somewhere between 14,000 and 20,000 people every day in shelters around the city. I might say, too, that of the 39 shelters, only 5 of them are in the black community. That they are scattered around the community, and they have largely been the response of the total religious community. A response to a problem we didn't create. It's a response to a problem that essentially is a result of federal cutbacks, as a result of federal layoffs, as a result of federal programs that no longer care for the mentally ill when they are able to walk around on their own. There would have been a time when most of the people that we find homeless would have received some kind of care as a result of federal government institutional services. Now they're basically cut out on their own in an attempt to balance the budget. Our churches have done a marvelous job with the business community for the last 4 or 5 years on this. How long we can continue, and when do we have to begin to take over some local institutional responsibility is a question that faces us. Another question that faces us is, again, one that is frightening because we don't know how it happened, and we really don't know yet what to do with it. But there's a figure that I think will wake us up, and that is that of the babies born in 1975, all babies, black, white, blue, brown, polka dot, 75% of them are now living in a single-parent household. That's 75% of the 11-year-olds are living with one parent. Now, think of what that does when we start talking about a gang problem. And I don't like the term gang. Anybody, any group of kids, you know, who are hanging out together get called a gang. Whether they are on their way to the library or to the zoo or to a baseball game, or whether some are out to do some devilment. And so I don't like labeling all of our young people who, for absence of recreation and for absence of adult supervision, find themselves depending on each other for comfort and guidance and support. But that becomes a problem that if we don't have to address it now, we have to address it in the near future. We have to find some way to begin to coordinate the recreational services that we have in abundance, the school programs and gymnasiums, some of whom are empty and absent after school hours, and our law enforcement. It just doesn't seem right and necessary for me for us to have our police force waiting for young people to get in trouble before we begin to relate to them. And that's why we've begun to channel more and more of our law enforcement resources into crime prevention. And crime prevention really means providing adult role models for particularly adult male role models for young people who right now may not have that sufficiently in their lives. Most of our school population, our school teachers are female. The kids tend to be living in homes with their mothers, and even where their father's in the home, they, like me, gone most of the time. And so the presence of male volunteers and male professionals in our youth-serving agencies like boys clubs, like the YMCA, I don't know, for the last almost 50 years, Mr. Winston in this facility has probably been the daddy to every boy that has come up in this neighborhood since Martin Luther King. And Mr. Winston almost single-handedly, because I didn't want any of these little rascals telling them that for the first time when they got to be teenagers. I wanted them to know I wanted them to be secure. In fact, it got so bad that when my oldest daughter first went to Southwest, you know, they had asked us to let our children go to Trinity School to integrate Trinity. And my oldest daughter went to Southwest, and she said, "You know one thing, Daddy?" She said, "You better take Lisa out of Trinity, and you better let her get into one of these elementary schools with some of these little ratty boys early, so that when she gets to be a teenager, she won't be hearing all this jive for the first time." Well, we listened to her. But bringing up girls and boys is a real problem. And teenage pregnancy is a problem that we have to find a way to deal with. And I'm really glad that one of the fraternities, that happens to be my fraternity, decided for the first time that I know of ever that they were going to do teen pregnancy workshops, and do the teen pregnancy workshops with young men between the ages of 12 and 18. And so when we start talking about dealing with our youth problems, when we start talking about taking on problems like teen pregnancy, when we start talking about dealing with drugs, we're really not talking about what has been traditionally city business. But what we are talking about is responding to a crisis that if we don't respond to it together, there won't be any way for us to catch up with it if it really and truly gets out of hand. Atlanta's been famous through the years for looking down the road and seeing what the crisis is going to be, and then coming together as a community, black and white, male and female, rich and poor, and coming together and finding ways to solve those problems before they get to be serious problems. And I think that's where we are now. But almost everything we do and everything that I've talked about, and Brother C.A. Scott will have to forgive me, and Brother Calhoun too, because here I have to get partisan. Because a lot of the breakdown in the federal responsibility, I think, has come because of the Reagan administration. And I think while I appreciate all that has been done in terms of generating a new support for the private sector, and I think we have taken advantage of that, and if there's any place that has made those programs, those ideas work, we do have good public-private cooperation in this city. And Republicans and Democrats do very well together in business. But Republicans don't have any sense of social responsibility, and it gets to the point where it doesn't make sense. They would rather pay a woman $20,000 on welfare than to put up $2,000 to keep a child in daycare. That it just seems to me that investing in human potential is something that we have been a little more sensitive to as Democrats. And that one of the reasons why I want everybody to get out and vote in this election is that I think we've got to make sure that we have a Senate that doesn't just rubber stamp all of the appointments that Ronald Reagan might make to our court system. Because what we're experiencing is a kind of deterioration in the quality of the judiciary and the movement of the judiciary to the right that will be with us for 20, 25 years after Ronald Reagan is gone. And so, getting out and voting on November the 4th and seeing to it that we send another senator to Washington to vote with Sam Nunn, it seems to be utmost important. I think it's also important at the county level that we have Martin Luther King III representing Fulton County on the Fulton County Commission. Because I think that what it says around this country, in fact, the only reason why I've been able to attract business into this city is not because of who Andrew Young is. And when Jimmy Carter asked me to go to the UN, I suggested Barbara Jordan, Yvonne Burke. I didn't really want to leave the Congress. He said the only difference is they probably are much more talented than you, but none of them had a connection with Martin Luther King. That around the world, one of the things that means well for Atlanta is Martin Luther King is known and loved and respected as a world leader. And whether it's in Ireland or in South Africa, people sing "We Shall Overcome." Now, I'm for John Lewis, but I don't want to get in a fight with Brother Scott, so I'll leave that. Portia Scott's a wonderful young lady, and I've been encouraging the Republicans to try to get her to run for the last 4 years. But they ought to give us some money, and we should have a bipartisan race. Well, I just don't want to fight with Brother Scott. Okay. But I think that Election Day is a time that will be a referendum on our future. And right now, I think that there's a lot up for grabs. And people don't really know which way we're going as a nation. We know we can't go any further the direction that Ronald Reagan has taken us. I mean, you can't raid Grenada. You can't get into war with Nicaragua. And somewhere we've got to begin to focus on the real problem in Central America, which is Mexico. I mean, if something happens in Mexico's economy, if they don't find a way to put people to work, if they don't find a way to develop their raw materials, a collapse in the Mexican economy really is a threat to the United States of America. It's a threat to our banking system of the whole free world. It's a threat to our borders because there's absolutely no way we'll be able to keep people from coming where jobs and food are. I don't care how many laws we pass by the Congress, but that's the only place in the Western Hemisphere that I see our national security really in danger. And yet that's the last place we talk about, and one place we don't look at all. But I think that what the message will go out of the November 4th election, and whoever we win, whoever we elect, will send messages to both parties and will help to shape the world that will look to the future. I think we've got a model that's working here in Atlanta. And I think that people are going to look to Atlanta, whether they be Democrats or Republicans, for solutions to problems. The truth of it is, none of the problems that we're talking about can be solved very quickly, but they can all be solved. And they're all problems that we can commit to work on together. Now, in the middle of that, I can't get by without saying something about Auburn Avenue. Because Auburn Avenue is going to be, it is not yet, but it's like the property on the south side. I've been saying for a long time, don't be upset about the south side. When the south side development starts, look out. We're going to be bowled over. And sure enough, just last month when they had a conference of developers on the south side, they were expecting 200 to come and 750 came. That when people are spending $1 million an acre on the north end of 285 to put up office buildings for people who want to be near the airport, and then when there's land at Camp Creek and at Washington Road and even at Cascade that you can get for $40,000, $50,000 an acre, where you're 10 minutes from the airport, it's just a matter of time before folks wake up and understand that. And now we have at least 4 major housing developments going on the south side, and one by Herman Russell downtown. We couldn't get people to do that. But now every one of those housing units is going to be sold out before it's completed. And nothing succeeds in business-like success. And we've already now got the next opportunity, and that is housing downtown. And that's where I think Auburn Avenue comes in. That it's hard for Auburn Avenue to sustain itself if we don't have people living and working downtown all the time. But I've always said there are 38,000 people that work at Georgia State. There are another 10,000 that are around Grady. There's not a single unit of housing within walking distance of either of those places. That we are going to see in the very near future housing going up in these areas. And we're going to see housing going